A cart of grain rolls out of a quiet town in northern Lordaeron. The driver doesn't know the wheat is poisoned, neither do the families waiting for it down the road. By the time anyone understands what's wrong with the bread, half the province is already dead and the other half is about to stand back up and start walking. That town is Andorhal, and the land around it is the Western Plaguelands. This is the story of how a kingdom's breadbasket became its graveyard, and who's still wandering the ruins, looking for peace. The land wasn't always called that. Before the Scourge, this was beautiful forested farmland east of Tirisfal Glades, bordered by the Alterac Mountains to the south. Hearthglen ran the local government, and Andorhal handled the grain, a lot of it, because this was the place that fed the northern half of the kingdom. So when the Lich King wanted to break the town, he didn't need an army first, he needed the bread. That plan ran through Kel'Thuzad. He'd been a mage of Dalaran, one of the very first to hear the Lich King whispering in the dark, and he threw himself into spreading the plague of undeath like a man who'd found his calling. Ner'zhul handed him plague energies sealed inside portable artifacts called cauldrons, and Kel'Thuzad and his cult of the damned hid them in the farming villages. Then they tainted the grain at its source. Food meant to keep a kingdom alive was turned into the thing that killed it, and then, somehow worse, into the thing that raised the corpses back up to serve. The man who'd come collect Kel'Thuzad's bones was Arthas Menethil. The prince had chased his vengeance all the way to Northrend, picked up the cursed runeblade Frostmourne, and used it to strike down the dreadlord Mal'Ganis. The blade gave him the power to win, and quietly signed him over to the Lich King. So Arthas came home a Death Knight, and first on the list was raising his old enemy, Kel'Thuzad, as a Lich. When Arthas reached Andorhal, a shroud of decay had settled over the place. Plague fog choked the fields and blotted out the sun, and yet this was one of the last spots in Lordaeron still under Alliance control. Uther the Lightbringer had gathered the surviving paladins of the Silver Hand here and turned the town into a base for striking back. He was also guarding something. After Arthas murdered his own father, the king's ashes had been sealed in an urn, and Uther had taken it on himself to protect them. Arthas needed that urn for the resurrection, so the old mentor and the fallen student were going to meet one more time. Arthas looked at the paladins and saw easy prey, and for most of them he was right. He cut down the men and women he'd trained beside without slowing down. Uther was different, and here the sources don't fully agree. In the novel Arthas, Rise of the Lich King, he's escorting the ashes when the fight finds him. The later chronicle drops the escort and tells it bigger. In that version, Uther held his own, then did the thing nobody else ever managed. He beat Arthas. He knocked the Death Knight flat on the ground, light-infused hammer raised, one swing away from ending the whole nightmare right there, and then he hesitated, or he was just slower. Uther was mighty but never as quick as the prince, and that gap was all Arthas needed. He recovered, and he didn't return the mercy. The apprentice who'd once been like a son drove Frostmourne through the old paladin's heart, and felt nothing watching him die. To Arthas, Uther was already an echo, a ghost from some half-remembered life. Because Uther didn't exactly leave. His tomb sits on Sorrow Hill, the one consecrated sane spot in the whole rotting zone, tended by a priest named Tel'Danis. During the Burning Crusade, a Draenei called Anchorite Truan shows up wanting to pay respects to the great Alliance hero he's heard so much about. To do it properly, he needs the Mark of the Lightbringer, which the Scarlet Crusade is hoarding in a guard tower near the gates of Hearthglen. You go get it, escort the Draenei to the tomb, and Uther's spirit appears, touched that strangers would come all this way to remember an old man. Not everybody remembers him kindly. On the Horde side, a blood elf named Melar Dawnblade hands out a darker version of the same quest. He was a pupil of Uther's once, until his teacher's prized student fell to darkness and Quel'Thalas burned, and the warm feelings evaporated. So Melar wants Horde players to defile the tomb, dousing that same mark in fel. When you do it, Uther's spirit can't understand the cruelty, then reads it in your mind, and it saddens him to see how dark the boy's heart has gone. He asks you to carry a message back. The Lightbringer forgives him and only hopes Melar will turn that grief toward rebuilding Quel'Thalas instead. In time, the Sunwell would be restored, and Dawnblade would make his peace, even return to defend his master's grave. The tomb itself later got a quiet visual upgrade that had everyone speculating about some big future use, and as far as anyone can tell, that payoff still hasn't arrived. That same tower where you grabbed the mark holds a much heavier story, and it belongs to the Fordrings. When the Scourge tore through Lordaeron, the survivors of the Silver Hand pulled together a new order called the Argent Dawn. Some of them curdled into zealots, and it didn't help that a dreadlord had quietly slipped into their ranks. Balnazar had murdered the paladin Sidon Dathrohan and was wearing his corpse like a costume, steering the most fanatical members until they splintered off entirely as the Scarlet Crusade. His corruption pushed them so far that they stopped being able to tell friend from foe, living from dead. They'll attack anyone, fully convinced they're the heroes. A grim fall for what started as a holy order. One of their knights was Taelan Fordring, and that surname matters because his father was Tirion Fordring. Tirion had thrown his whole life away over an old orc named Eitrigg. He defended the orc's life, got stripped of his titles, excommunicated, and exiled, which left his young son to grow up without him and find his own path. That path led Taelan straight into the red robes of the Crusade. Back in Classic, you helped Tirion try to save the boy, telling Taelan the truth about the rot inside his order. He listens, he tries to cut his way out, and at a tower that now carries his name, he runs into Grand Inquisitor Isillion, who has him killed before he can ever reach his father. Taelan's death is what finally drags Tirion out of his self-pity. After avenging the boy, he swears to make his son's dream real, to build an order that hunts evil, no matter what politics it hides behind. That's no empty vow. Tirion would cleanse the mighty blade Ashbringer, found the Argent Crusade, carry the fight to Arthas in Northrend, and shatter the Lich King's frozen reign. Then he'd come home to Hearthglen, where you can join him to train recruits and root out a traitor feeding the local gnolls materials for necromancy. His own story would end in Legion, when he fell to the demons and passed the Ashbringer on. The Crusade, meanwhile, kept making life miserable for whoever was still breathing. They seized the Northridge lumber mill, which did not sit well with Nathaniel Dumas, whose father had given his life to that mill before the family fled to Stormwind. Unable to drive the fanatics out the honest way, Nathaniel settles on sabotage, sending you to release termites into the mill so the bugs handle the rest. Come Cataclysm, he's back running the family business with his wife Kelly and their baby boy. The Horde tangles with the Scarlets as well, and one of the angriest is Lillian Voss. Sylvanas' val'kyr raised her, and she wanted no part of it. She tried to run home to her father, but he was Scarlet Crusade, and a daughter risen as undead was unforgivable to a man like that. He put out a hit on her, so Lillian struck back, and now she stalks the land, hunting any Scarlet or necromancer she can find, a trail leading right toward the doors of Sholomance. That place, though, deserves its own telling another time. Now, back to the ruins. Uther's death broke Andorhal's resistance, and the town fell under Scourge control, run for a while by a lich called Araj the Summoner, the regional commander of the dead here. Strangely, The Scourge even seemed to be poking at time itself, and during Chromie's scenario, you travel back to this very spot to clear temporal parasites out of these silos and gather watches whose hands are all frozen at 3 in the morning, exactly when the plague first struck. Your reward is a dampener built to weaken Araj, and a scarab from his shattered phylactery ends up a key piece for the way into Scholomance. While Araj sat on Andorhal, the Cenarion Circle was quietly working the harder problem of healing the land itself, a quest that began back in Classic. There were 8 plague cauldrons across the Plaguelands, 4 here in the west and 4 in the east, all belching out corruption. The work sends you to 4 poisoned farmsteads, and that's where the dead get personal. At Fellstone Field, you meet the spirit of Janice Fellstone, who doesn't know she's dead yet. She asked you to deliver a package which takes Alliance players to old Emma Fellstone in Stormwind and Horde players to Jeremiah Fellstone, the Undercity cockroach vendor. Both siblings got Janice's keepsakes mailed to them, including, with grim comedy, the deed to the farm, which neither wants. Inside is half a good luck charm, and her ghoul husband John has the other half. Bring her both, and the truth finally clicks, and she rests. At Dawson's Tears, Mrs. Dawson wanders the farm as a skeleton, and her diary tells the rest. Her husband turned before she did, and it took everything she had to drag him into the one place that could hold him. She hid the key on herself and hoped to escape. You put her down, take the key, and deal with Farmer Dawson in the outhouse for the cabinet key, so the family's valuables don't go to waste. It's looting a dead couple's house while they watch, and the game just lets you. At the riding haunt, you find Mulgris Depriver, a Tauren of the Circle who came to heal this land and gave his life doing it. In his last moments, you ease the suffering wildlife and carry his glyph token branch back to the druids to study. Their patience paid off. By Cataclysm, most of these farms are green again, and only Garen's Withering still stands grey. Delgaran, an Argent Crusade veteran who once fought across Outland and Northrend, used to be just a farmer here, and he can't quite face the old place yet, so he asks you to bring back small things. His wife Gloria's prayer book, a faded finger painting his daughter Andrea once made. Even Zenkiki gets a happy ending. The goofy forest troll initiate who never could command his druid magic until the circle wisely steered him toward healing, because at least those spells can't miss. That troll would turn up everywhere after, an absurd glow up for a kid who couldn't cast straight. Then the fragile calm shatters, because Andorhal flares up one more time into a 3-way war between the Scourge, the Horde, and the Alliance. The factions are led by 2 Death Knights who happen to be old friends, Tessarion for the Alliance and Koltira Deathweaver for the Horde, and neither really wants to fight the other, while the dead are still standing. You burn through Araj's summoned skeletons and corner Darkmaster Gandling, headmaster of Scholomance, until the 2 commanders force him to flee. Tessarion and Koltira agree not to kill each other today and ask you to keep it quiet, but somebody is always listening. Here's what neither of them knows. The disguised officer their soldiers report to, Lindsay Ravenson, is Sylvanas Windrunner herself, and she has decided the friendship between her Death Knight and Tessarion is a weakness she won't tolerate. When some farmer militia jump the gun and attack without orders, the battle reignites, and Sylvanas unleashes her val'kyr, raising the freshly slain into Forsaken troopers right there on the field. The Alliance cuts down a fair number of them, and even their commander, Aradne, but they can't hold against the rising tide. The Forsaken take the city, and it costs Sylvanas more than it looks, because those val'kyr aren't just troop generators, they're the bargain keeping the Banshee Queen out of eternal damnation. so spending them in battle or losing them is never a small thing for her. For a moment, set the lore mechanics aside and just look at this place. The Western Plaguelands is the one zone where almost every quest is a small act of mercy for the dead. You aren't here for loot and glory. You're delivering a charm to a woman who doesn't know she's gone, carrying a Tauren's last words home, fetching a faded child's painting so a tired old soldier can finally grieve. The land is healing slowly, the way the Cenarion Circle promised it would, and the people who suffered here are getting their rest a little at a time. Lordaeron lost almost everything, but the soil is coming back, and maybe, with enough time, the souls will too. And then Sylvanas reminds you that mercy has limits. Koltira, who only wanted an honest death in battle, gets dragged through a portal by a hooked chain into the depths of the Undercity, so the Banshee Queen can carve the compassion out of him. For years, nobody knew what became of him. Not until Legion, when Tessarion and the Death Lord stormed the Undercity to pull their friend out, recruiting a hollowed-out Koltira with no real account of what was done to him. You can only imagine. And that is how the story of the Western Plaguelands ends. If you enjoyed this one, let me know in the comments what you want to see next. Thank you for watching, leave a like, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.